Hi, I'm Caitlin Grosso, and I'm here with Knowledge at Wharton High School. It is my pleasure to welcome Buck Benedict to our studio today. Buck Benedict teaches public speaking and speechwriting at the Fels Institute of Government, but he began teaching at Penn in 2002 at Wharton, where he taught management communications in the MBA program for 8 years. He was awarded the first Fels Teaching Award in 2009 and was also nominated for the 2013 Provost Award for Teaching Excellence. Buck also works as a communications consultant and a speechwriter. Thanks for joining us today, Buck.
Thanks, Caitlin. It's a pleasure.
So just to start out, what does being a communications consultant entail?
Well, as you and I talked before, I started out in corporate communications, worked for a couple of companies, multinational companies, and part of my job, I had various assignments, but part of my job was to write speeches. And after I left corporate work in the early 90s, I decided to go off into business for myself as a consultant. And the job that I created for myself was to help companies in crisis situations deal with the media and the public because of my experience in the chemical and pharmaceutical industry, and then also to write speeches for CEOs in those industries. So that a communications consultant is somebody that helps the heads of companies to communicate better.
That's great to know for our high school audience out there. So just being a corporate communications consultant, how did you make the transition to being an instructor at Penn in 2002?
I got lucky. Actually, it was a time when Wharton was greatly expanding its MBA program, and they needed more adjuncts here to help teach the required core course in communications, management communications it's called. And like lots of others, I came in, auditioned for it, and got the part. And that's how I got started. It was a great opportunity, and I had a chance to teach in a couple of other schools as well. But my focus became really on Wharton and teaching management communications, and then ultimately made a transition to the Fels Institute of Government when a job opened up there.
So how does your course at Fels help your students improve their communication skills?
Well, communications is a skill, okay? And if you're an athlete, you know that you've got to practice, and you know that you've got to have a coach, and you know that you've got to have repetition in terms of learning good things and doing them over and over again. And so what I've tried to do as a communications consultant and as a teacher, basically, is to help people, to give people the opportunity to practice, to give them assignments that are going to be helpful to them, and then give them the opportunity to get feedback both from me, from their classmates, their peers, and to really learn, and as well as videotape it. And seeing themselves on videotape will help them as well. So it's a process of looking at great speeches, which we include in our courses, speeches that I think will have something for the students to learn from, and we get them off of YouTube or we get them off of various and sundry presidential archives sites of speeches, and I ask them to look at them for various and sundry reasons, and then what we'll do is have them then make a speech, and there are different types of speeches. There's an introduction speech to somebody at the beginning of the course, and there's an occasion speech, which can be for any particular occasion they can find themselves addressing. There's a persuasive speech, and there's an inspirational speech. So I try to give them various types of speech assignments that they'll find that they'll be using. That and everything I try to teach is practical. I let them use their own coursework, or I let them use their own work experiences to try to build on things that they know that they're going to have to work on themselves, and try to make it as practical as I can.
Well, I had the chance to sit in on your class a few weeks ago, and it was fascinating and so inspiring for me. But I guess generally, what do you hope that your students will take away from your course?
Well, confidence, number one. I want them to feel better about their own speaking abilities. I want to give them the opportunity to see themselves, so that there's criticism that people can get from their peers or from me or the teaching assistant, but unless they actually see it on camera, they're not going to necessarily believe that they do this or they do that, and that could be a distraction. So I want them to take away the fact that how they look. Now, one of the important learnings I think that students get is that so many people say that they're nervous to begin with, and we're all nervous. It's natural to be nervous speaking because people are going to be making a judgment of you, and how we look is going to be important to how we feel about ourselves. So what my students learn very, very quickly in the course by looking at the videotape and by getting feedback is that I may feel nervous, but it doesn't necessarily come across in the camera. And that leads to a freeing up of concerns that they may have that are really exaggerated. And so I've tried to build confidence. I try to build comfort in speaking again and again. I try to give them the opportunity to learn, to organize their material, because in a speech as opposed to a book, they don't have the opportunity to look back over something. You can't go back and read it again. You can't underline it and go back to the key things. You have one time to get it. And so a speaker has the responsibility to organize the thoughts so that they flow logically, and also to try to emphasize with their voice and their body language those things that are most important. It's like underlining.
Right. So I know an important theme in your class is speaking the truth.
Yes.
So what does speaking the truth mean to you?
Well, as you know, it is. It's something I teach right from the very first class, right up to the last class when they give their inspirational speech, and I really am asking them to speak their truth. That's what the assignment is. What do I mean by that? Yeah, I mean it's their truth. Who are they? What are they all about? What are they passionate about? Tell their story. Tell the stories of their families. I get a lot of immigrant stories in my class in the inspirational speeches about parents or grandparents who have made major changes in their lives, given up their homeland to go someplace else, and started all over and created a family and a new country for themselves. And it's just a wonderful inspiration to everybody else. And speaking the truth for me is it's all about who you are. And my belief is that if you are able to expose yourself, if you're able to be vulnerable, then you'll be in a position to get other people to speak theirs. And all of a sudden, there's a much, much deeper connection between people. It's a much more honest communication.
What are the characteristics of effective speakers?
Well, we talk about confidence, okay? I think that's very important. But again, think about confidence in terms of it's your own sense of self-worth. It's your own feeling, and I tell people in my classes, I want you to talk about what's important to you. I want you to really feel that it's necessary to communicate to that audience out there what you're all about and what's important to you. And so part of that confidence really is feeling good about what you do. And so I want them to talk about that. Another aspect, I think, obviously, is making eye contact with the audience. It's important to make eye contact to let the audience know that you care about them, to let them know that you're paying attention to them. But I say it's a two-way street, because you as a speaker, I want you to be taking in what the audience is telling you in return. They're making all sorts of comments with their body language, with their facial expressions and things like that. You as the speaker have to be able to read these things so that you know how to adjust and really do everything you possibly can to adapt yourself to what's happening in the audience at that moment. One of the hardest things for a speaker to do is depart from the script that they have because of the confidence factor, because you've practiced it, because you feel good about it. But a lot of times you have to make these adjustments in order to be present in the moment to that particular audience. So you as a speaker have to be reading the signals that they're sending back to you. So that's another aspect that I want them to really be present in the moment. I want them to be taking in the signals. And lastly, I really want them to respect the audience. I think it's awfully important that if an audience is paying attention to a speaker, the speaker owes them the obligation to listen very carefully to questions the audience might have that still haven't been answered. And so a lot of times speakers get rid of finish a speech and they go, "Phew, it's all over." But it's not all over. The most important thing to that particular audience is the answer to their questions. So I want people to really be looking forward to those answers as the opportunity to pay back the audience for all the time and attention that they've given them. So those are the things that I try to communicate to my students.
That's great advice. And I know that you teach undergrads, but mainly graduate students.
That's right.
But how can you apply these skills you mentioned to high school students?
Well, I had a chance, one of the best teaching experiences I ever had was right here at Penn in the Upward Bound program. And I had a class that came in, and I got to say, they scared me to death. They came in, they were full of energy. These are summer school students. They're here at Penn. They expect to learn a lot in a very short time. There must have been 22 of them. Most of my classes are 16 or 17 people. Most of them are graduate students, and these were high school seniors and juniors. And I got them in the class, and I quite frankly, I didn't know how to relate to them. And I thought, my God, how can I do this? What do I have that's going to be helpful to them? Well, what I did was I took my course, my basic course of 14 weeks, and I tried to narrow it down to 3 or 4 or 6 classes, I guess it was at that time, and I basically just tried to give them the idea that they have to be able to connect with the audience. They have to be able to be honest about themselves and tell their stories. They have to be able to read what the audience is saying back to them. And what I tried to do basically was try to show them what I thought were good speeches. With Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, which I show to every class. I don't care whether they're a high school audience or a graduate school audience. Everybody should see and really appreciate that speech. But I also try to have them read Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, because I think, again, here's a beautiful example of really boiling down important ideas into very few, 272 words. Amazing job that he did there. And I try to show them things that I think are going to be effective for them. I show them a Bobby Kennedy speech, perhaps, or something. But again, I think the same lessons pertain to high school students that pertain to graduate students, and that is really be yourself. Be honest with yourself. Communicate with the audience honestly. Get into a conversation with the audience if you possibly can. Read their body language. Get a chance of really understanding what they're all about ahead of time. That's the important thing. So often we go in and we don't have a sense of who the audience is. You've got to do your homework, because if you're going to communicate with them in their language and in things that they're going to, ways that they're going to understand, you've got to be in a position to know who they are and what they care about. And those are the things you've got to talk about.
Thank you so much, Buck, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be here with us today. It was an honor to have you at the Knowledge at Wharton High School studio. But just to leave the audience with one final question, what are your favorite speeches of all time?
Well, I think that's a hard question to answer, as you know. But I tell you, I'd like to give you a range, okay? I use TED Talks a lot because they're current, okay? I get so many complaints from my students. Well, your speeches are so old, why don't you have something current? So I use TED Talks a lot. I use Susan Cain. She wrote the book Quiet, about introverts in a world of extroverts. And it's a wonderful story about her being a young girl and an introvert going to camp. And she goes there with a whole slew of books, and she thinks summer camp is going to be the greatest experience of her life because she's going to get a chance to read all these books, and she never had a chance to read one because of summer camp was doing something else. It's extroversion. And so that's a great TED Talk to look at. Isabel Allende's talk about passion is very important, I think, for people to look at. Another one is Amy Cuddy's talk about power positions and things, and really getting people ready to face interviews or speeches or talks or something like that. That's a good one. But again, YouTube is a great source of speeches, and I think a very good one is a very short one. It's Bono, the singer Bono's award acceptance speech of the NAACP award, I think back in 2007 or 8, if I'm not mistaken, and it's very short. It's only 4 minutes long, but boy, if you want to see somebody speaking their truth and the passion of their conviction, take a look at Bono's NAACP acceptance speech.
Thanks again, Buck. I'm Caitlin Grasso with Knowledge at Wharton High School, and thanks for joining us, everyone.